Evening, everybody. George Raw. My name is Nick Thompson, and I'm a vet. And I started this lovely Facebook Live because we went into lockdown the first time, and I thought people are wanting to think about things other than their living room wallpaper and things other than when they're going to get back to work and these kind of things. So we put together the George on Raw, which is taking a quote from Winston Churchill. He said, "More George, less war." And I thought, I'm going to twist that because I think he does very, very good quotes. So I hope you're well. It's Wednesday the 18th of November, and we've got another couple of weeks of the old lockdown to go. I hope you're okay. Maintain psychological resilience, and you're good with hope your dogs and your cats and your pets and everybody in your household is in good shape. We're really lucky this evening because Lisa Hannaby, who is a researcher in psychology and nutrition, is coming along to talk to us, and she's going to be talking to us before I bring her in. She's chomping at the bit. Before I bring her in, she is going to be talking to us about mood and food. We spoke last week, she and I, and we thought, what are we going to talk about? We need to talk about moods and food. Great, there's a title. So we're going to be talking about mood and food, and we're going to be looking in some depth. I've spoken to you about it on the Gut Doctor and in Georgia about these things, but Lisa, who is a trained psychology researcher, I think going to introduce concepts and ideas that we only dream of. So I'm really, really excited to bring Lisa in. Lisa, hello. How are you?
I'm good. That was a fair introduction there, Nick.
I didn't know that was going to come. It's usually about 3 seconds long, but I was inspired. The muse was with me. I hope you didn't fall asleep while I was going on and on. It's really great to have you here. Just to give us some context for those people who haven't read the bio, I hope everybody has. Yes, please read the bios, which are in the Instagram posts because they're very interesting. But for those who haven't read them, please tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are. So please say where you are now and how you got to where you are now. What was the journey that brought you here? And tell us about you and raw food. That would be really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, I suppose most people will know me from Raw Nutrition at the retreat. So I know you've commented and you've shared quite a lot of my posts. I've recently rebranded into Nourish, which was a play on my psychology background and now my nutrition. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment, really. And it is looking at how psychology meets nutrition. So my journey was a fair journey, really. I spent about 10 years working with humans. So I started off working with children, worked in children's services and in education. I was also a lecturer in health and social care. So my side of it really was the psychology and the sociology. So my degree is early childhood studies and psychology, and I've got a master's in inclusion and marginalisation. So it's all that societal stuff, really. But obviously working with children and young people and the psychology element, we were always sort of looking at behaviour, environment, all of that sort of stuff. And food wasn't really talked about. And it wasn't until I sort of started, and I've always been fascinated into it. You know, I'm really into sort of health and fitness myself. So the more I got into it personally, I was like, why isn't this actually being explored? And then every time it was talked about, you know, when we were looking at, you know, behavioural issues, it just was like, no, food, it's nothing to do with it. It's nothing to do with it. And I was like, how is it not? So yeah, after about 10 years, I just decided to leave all that behind and work with animals, as you do. I trained as a groomer. And then as I developed a client base with the grooming, customers were saying, can you look after my pets for me? So I started the home boarding, then I built the cattery. And then I started to notice the same problems. So behaviour with cats and dogs, I was like, why are we not talking about food here? Talking about training, why are we not talking about food? So yeah, I just got into the whole raw. And that's where I am now, really. So Raw Nutrition was born, so that was primarily retail. And I've just always been a bit of a nerd and a researcher. So that's where I am. I freelanced for Edition Dog, Edition Cat, Good Dog Journal, and we've also got a new magazine coming out next year, which is called On the Couch, which is looking at the psychology and sociology stuff. So that's really exciting as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I did an interview, and some of the guys who are watching may have heard it because it was on Radio 2 with Nihal, and I was on with a couple of veterinary colleagues, and they were saying that dogs, I can't remember the detail, traumatized by the whole thing, but they were saying, I think that dogs don't have emotions. And if anybody was listening to it and they can remember the detail, they said, dogs don't need variety in food, and among many other things, and that dogs don't have emotions. Anybody? They remember. Let's go with that for now. So, what would you say to my profession, to those within it? And I respect their opinion. They may be completely correct, and I may be wrong. What's your take on emotions in canines?
I suppose you've got the two elements of it. So you've got emotions in terms of how we're feeling. So yeah, dogs can't tell us how they're feeling. So we will label our emotions, won't we? Whereas dogs can't do that. But if we look at the biology of emotions, then things happen in the body and in the brain, which make emotions happen, make us feel emotions. So the biology is there. Yeah. So how can you say, when we look at all the compounds and things that make up these emotions, how can we say that they don't happen? They might not be able to tell us, but I mean, dogs do show us, don't they? We've got the stress response, we've got anxious behaviors, so they can show those behaviors. But when we look at biology of it, that happens. So you can't really argue with that. And they've trained dogs to actually sit in MRI scanners now, haven't they? And they can see how things sort of happen in their brain.
Wow.
So we're making progress.
Yeah.
I just don't think you can argue with the science of it, really. So yeah.
Yes.
And ask any owner. Dogs, they do feel, don't they? And they do demonstrate emotions.
Yeah, but that would argue. So if I was one of those vets, they would say, "Oh, but that's anthropomorphism. They don't actually feel guilt because they've pooed on the carpet." You get into quite complex arguments there.
Yeah.
You could argue that they read your body language and they don't why you're upset. I don't believe it. I think that they do feel something because they have soiled the nest. They've done something they know to be wrong, and you could say that there's an emotional element to that. But I think dogs do feel emotion. They feel joy. They feel sadness. I think they feel depression. But I think it's, if you can't measure it easily, and you can't measure emotion, even in people, you can't measure emotion easily. You can, but it's not easy. But in dogs, it's even less easy. And I think that's the problem, is that we haven't got the measurement. Therefore, we say, "Oh, is it there or isn't it there?" Whereas anybody who's ever had a dog will say, "Of course they have."
Yeah, I think the guilt one is a huge one in the dog sort of world, isn't it? Because, that there is that argument that they don't feel guilt. They just know that, you don't want them to do that. So they're responding to your body cues and they're responding to what's happened previously. And, we're always talking about dogs learning from, the consequences of their actions. So, that's always an element of it. But then, they also do pick up on our emotions, don't they? So when they they've looked at dogs, and when they've exposed them, when we feel certain things, our hormones change, you know, what we secrete changes. And dogs, you know, their noses are incredible, aren't they? And they can pick up on that. You know, they've used sweat samples. And if you've got a stressy sweat that you're presenting to a happy dog, they suddenly start to become quite stressed, you know, hyper aroused and anxious. So how do you explain that?
Yeah, totally. And
they're responding, aren't they?
of course they are. And just talking about smell, as you were there, Sasha is saying that during that interview, one of the comments that was made, and they may be right, but they were saying that dogs are not affected by the smell of their food. And
the food.
Of their food, yes. I think that was the context. Sasha, if we're wrong there, just shout, please. But what do you think dogs care about what their food smells like?
I mean, we always say that dogs won't eat anything that's not good for them. I mean, you know, the self-selection thing with my Whippet, he self-selects a rhododendron, so that's just out of the equation. You know, he has no clue what's good for him. But, you know, I think a lot of people have sort of said, you know, when you present your dog something and it's not right, they won't eat it. So I think they do respond, don't they? And their sense of smell is incredible. So how can they not?
I agree. I think that sense of smell is very important to them, but you could argue they do eat cat shit and you know, they can eat a carcass that's been rotting for 2 weeks. However, they will be engaging with their sense of smell, and if it smells wrong, they won't eat it. I believe dogs don't eat everything. And it's just that they've got a different range of what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, no, Sasha is saying it wasn't that. It was that strong smells like perfume, etc., don't affect dogs. Again, I don't go with that personally. Do you?
I mean, like, I just know from a personal level, you know, there's certain shops that you go into and the smell is that overpowering. You know, it can give you a headache, can't it?
Lush.
and your body has then got to sort of neutralize those toxins, and you know the dog's body has got to do the same, hasn't it? So how can it not?
I know. My daughter came home and they'd been playing with a tiny bit of scent at her friend's house, and I almost couldn't breathe. I'm that bad, but I'm not a dog, although my wife would say otherwise. And yeah, so there you go. Let's put that one to bed. And you have a Whippet. I didn't know you had a Whippet.
Didn't you?
That's
Oscar, yes. We've Ellie and I have tried Oscar and Bluebell, by the way.
Oh, okay. They are virtual friends, are they? Okay.
They are.
a little love affair that Daddy didn't know about. Gosh, I hope he's going to come and ask for her hand in marriage and do the honourable thing.
He might not.
Oh, bless him. Okay, well, that's amazing. Because Bluebell, of course. So you've got Oscar the Whippet, and we have Bluebell the Whippet cross Italian Greyhound. So she looks like a Whippet who's shrunk in the wash.
But she's beautiful. She's so lovely.
She is beautiful, and I haven't seen Oscar. So please do send a photo over because it'd be lovely to see him.
Well, he's a one-eyed Whippet.
Oh, I have seen him. Therefore, yes. Oh, yeah. He's a corker. Yes. We like him. We like him a lot. Now, not everybody is smitten with Whippets and fast, pointy, skinny things, and therefore let's move on. So I told you that we wouldn't have any problem with just chatting about stuff. Okay, I think we've done some good stuff so far, but let's go back to the script that we thought. So I'm fascinated that you're talking about dogs responding to our moods. Now, this is not a new thing to me, because as part of a homeopathic consultation, I will ask how your dog responds to your moods, usually quite obvious ones, like you're having a really bad day. What does your dog do? Some dogs respond, some dogs don't. But tell us about that, and then we'll see where we go from there. I'm fascinated. Humans and mood, dogs and mood. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that smell, we know that, depending on how we feel, we do secrete different hormones, we do have a different smell. How we behave is differently. So we know that dogs can respond to the smell. And if we're stressed, they will start demonstrating
Yeah.
hyperactive behaviors, anxious behaviors. But
Yeah.
there is more attention being paid to these things called mirror neurons. So it's quite well known in the human realm. So, like, for example, the typical psychopath test is if you yawn, someone else should yawn. If they don't, they're a psychopath. So the idea is, so if I yawn now, Nick.
Yes. Yes.
So
Oh.
so there's parts in your brain that will recognize what other people are doing and that they will copy. So that comes in with empathy, so that you can, if somebody else is upset, then you sort of empathize with them. And the idea is that dogs do actually have mirror neurons as well. So they can actually pick up on that. So depending on how we're feeling, they will respond. So if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling low in mood, if we're feeling quite stressed, then they could then mirror that. The other interesting thing is that they can also mirror other dogs in the home. So you might not have a particularly stressy dog, but you might have another stressy dog. So there's an idea that actually, depending on their social bonding, if they're quite close, then they can start mirroring each other. So it's usually paid attention to with play. So, they're doing the play bow and they'll mirror each other. But there's this new idea that, well, not that new, that they will sort of copy stressy and anxious behavior as well. So my concern is, although, as owners and what we feed, we pay so much attention to what our dogs eat. Actually, what is our health and well-being like? So, are we stressed? Are we anxious? What are we eating? And how is our health potentially impacting our dogs?
Awesome.
I might get shot here.
No, I love it. I absolutely love it, because what I kind of see it from the other perspective, in that one of the things that I've been saying to people for the last 20 years is that I really want to inspire people to see how big an influence nutrition is on health, so that they go, oh my god, the dog is just completely different, and they're so much more energetic, and they smell less and what have you. I must look at my diet because I would like to be more energetic and smell less, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that been one of my drivers for as long as I can remember. So it's really fascinating that you're tying that up and saying that there is a mirror. How are you going with that conversation with people?
I think, I mean, we, quite often, like, my dogs will eat better than me, because we're all in that situation, aren't we? We've had a really long day, and it's just sometimes easier to just grab a tin of soup and just sit there and just sort of not say anything to anybody. And, whereas the dogs, I've planned out, it's in their Tupperware, it's all ready. So it's really easy to forget about ourselves, isn't it? But the point is, our body has cells, and our cells need things to do things. Without those things, it can't do what it needs to. The same goes for the brain, doesn't it? So we've got all of these cells in the brain that need stuff to do what they do. And if we're not actually providing it, then where's it going to get it from? So yeah, that's where, I think we really need to look at our own health, as well as, we're doing great with our dogs, but are we doing that great with ourselves?
So what are your top 3 pieces of advice for humans with their nutrition? This wasn't planned, by the way, guys. I'm completely putting her on the spot. So if she melts, then you'll know why. What do you think? Just off the top of your head.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? We always sort of say the same things, don't we? But I just don't think we really understand why. So it's the same things, isn't it? You want that protein, you want the leafy greens, they're really important. You want the nuts, you want the seeds, and you want to limit sugar. As much as we demonize sugar, it takes all of these B vits and things to actually convert, but it provides none. So we're in a negative, aren't we? If you think, it's like a bank balance, then we're constantly taking out, we're just going to be overdrawn, aren't we? So yeah, it's that. You want good quality protein that's digestible, but you also need to provide the nutrients to help it do what it needs to do. And as much as, like, for humans, we demonize carbohydrates, they're actually really good. We need them for energy. We've got carbohydrates, fiber falls in with that, and we need fiber, for our gut. So yeah, I think it's that, we need the good quality protein, we need the carbohydrates, we need those macronutrients, but we need the leafy greens and, all the nutrients that go in with that, really. So
we as omnivores, you mean?
Yeah.
Humans as omnivores, we need those leafy greens. Totally with you. And I think
Yeah.
dogs do too, but just much less because they're so much more carnivorous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, with humans. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we just don't eat them, do we? Like processed food, it's so much easier, isn't it, to just kind of like, nip to the supermarket and get something processed. But again, it's going back to that basics, isn't it? Eating good, whole foods. But, similarly with our dogs, that's where the raw diet comes in. We're getting this bioavailable protein, we're getting the fats in there. And, with you always say about your NHS, your nuts, your herbs, your seeds, they're really important, aren't they?
Yeah. Good. At least I'm listening. I'm really glad you're the first person I've ever heard quote me back to the NHS. So thank you very much, Lisa. Your check is on in the post.
See, I do listen.
You do listen. It's fantastic. It's really nice. Thank you very much indeed.
It's okay.
So the mirroring, because there's a couple of things. I mean, for me, one of my on the sugar side of things is Gary Taubes, who wrote The Case Against Sugar. You come across that?
Yes. Yeah.
The Case Against Sugar. I imagine I go on about it all the time. So most people will think. So I won't put up a reference. But the other one that I find is the other person is really fascinating. And talking about the psychology of mirroring is a guy called Sapolsky. Have you come across Sapolsky? I think he's a lecturer at Cornell, and he basically just studies cortisol and stress response. And he's written a book, amazing book, called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, which if you're interested in stress response and sociology and how animals work and things, it's a fascinating book by a guy called Sapolsky, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. One of the experiments that he describes is that in the early days they were looking for whether there is this is there compassion within the higher apes, because he's big into baboons, just for the sake of baboons, but also he uses them very compassionately to research cortisol and things and stress response and what have you. And so what they would do is they would have a room, they would have the kennels, and one of the baboons would be taken into the middle of the room in order to have a blood sample taken. They would measure cortisol response and it would go whoop like this, because nobody likes having their blood taken. But what they found surprising, which I don't think is that surprising, is that all the baboons who were in the vicinity watching this baboon go, oh, I don't want to have my blood taken, their cortisol would rise as well. So it has been, as Caroline put up earlier, that there is science to demonstrate that there is this mirroring, this compassion. Okay, there's a difference between a baboon and a dog, but is there? I mean, you have higher centers and things. Discuss. A baboon and a dog see a stressful incident. Discuss. You have 1,500 words.
In terms of evolution, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because ultimately, if they're feeling stressed, then actually everybody else needs to be, worried about the same thing, don't they? So it makes absolute sense.
Yes. I mean, it will tie communities together. Communities of baboons, of chimpanzees, humans. If somebody's stressed, there's a reason for that. If everybody's slightly on their guard, then that troop, that group is going to last longer, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. Amazing.
In our modern times, there are so many things that do stress us out. It's no longer helpful for us, is it? And I suppose that's where the problem is. So the more we're getting stressed, the more people around us are getting stressed, the more our dogs are getting stressed, we're depleting nutrients, and it's just that vicious circle, isn't it? Totally. So it's getting a handle on that. Oh, there we go. That's that book.
There's the book. Yeah, no, Yasmin is amazing. She's like our little researcher. And any interesting things, she'll go ping. Here's your link. Brilliant. God bless you. Jasmine, we love you. Thank you very much. So you wanted to, here's me. I'm going to try and stop. This is all really fascinating. So it's difficult for me not to say
I really like it. I love discussing stuff with people.
It's good, isn't it? So tell us about neurotransmitters. You said to me that you really wanted to talk about neurotransmitters. So I'm going to give you, in fact, we've got 4 minutes until we're supposed to finish, but we're just going to overrun. I don't care. We're just going to overrun. Tell us about neurotransmitters.
Yeah,
Lisa,
I think
please.
everybody kind of knows that they exist. They are chemical messengers in the brain, and we have, they do drive behavior. So we've got different neurotransmitters that drive different behavior, but ultimately they still need to be synthesized, and they need nutrients for that to happen. And this is the problem. So we've already said about, in states of chronic stress, things get depleted, so things can't be made as efficiently as they should be. And again, it's that, I always liken it to sort of Goldilocks, the porridge in Goldilocks. So you've got it too cold, you've got it too hot. You want everything in the body to be just right, and the body likes balance. And this is where we have our problem. So we might have too much of a neurotransmitter, we might have too little of a neurotransmitter, and that then all impacts mood. So we need good quality nutrients to actually synthesize these neurotransmitters. So we know that amino acids are the precursors to certain neurotransmitters, and we also need those nutrients. So you've got your B vits, you've got your magnesium, you've got your zinc, you've got your vitamin C that are all needed as well. And what's really interesting, I don't think magnesium is paid the attention that it kind of needs. So with dogs especially, they've noticed that dog magnesium levels drop in the winter, which is really interesting. They also drop in working dogs because of the high turnover, and they obviously drop in stressful situations. So if you've got a dog that's being presented with a stressor, the more they are then exposed, then the magnesium doesn't drop as much, so they do develop a tolerance or resilience to it rather. But if you've got a stressed dog, then it will be depleting their magnesium, and I just don't think it's really talked about. But again, we're coming back to like the leafy greens and things, aren't we?
But there are those amongst us who don't like to feed any leafy greens whatsoever. But moving on from that contentious story, so what's your solution to magnesium problem? Where do you like to go in dogs for magnesium?
Magnesium, I think it's your leafy green. I mean, you get some from your meats, but you've got it in your nuts and seeds. So your NHS again.
NHS.
You know what you're talking about, Nick.
No, I actually make it up as I go along. NHS is just a really useful way to hang nuts and seeds. And I just think, what I say to clients and when I'm lecturing is carnivores eat herbivores. Herbivores eat leafy greens. So it stands to reason for me that sooner or later, one way or another, even if they're just bathing in them because they're trying to swim through this rumen to get to the liver or the intestines or something like that, they're just going to get plastered in this green material, which they're going to take off them and their buddies, and so they will have exposure on a fairly regular basis. Or if they eat a whole rabbit, then they're going to get loads of greens there. So I think that you can make a very strong argument for greens. So tell us a little bit more about magnesium. This is fascinating.
Yeah, well, I just found it really fascinating that levels will drop in the winter, and it was purely, they just likened it to them keeping warm. So obviously, again, we're coming back to that idea that the more you're asking your body to do, the more that it is depleting what it's got in it. So what I found really interesting as well was for working dogs, and I think we ask working dogs to perform, and we don't necessarily think about what they're depleting in the process. So I just think it's just worth considering. And serotonin again is another thing that can get depleted in working dogs, which can then drive anxious behaviour. So I think that's another interesting point. And also we know that serotonin is sort of linked with hormones. So we know that if estrogen or testosterone drops, and serotonin drops. So again, you've got that element in the working dog as well for anxiety. So yeah, I just think there's a lot of different things to sort of think about when we're asking the body to perform, and how it then depletes, and how it affects neurotransmitter synthesis, utilization, degradation. So yeah.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about histamine, just as a final thought. Just a bit. Sorry, I'm going to squeeze every ounce of goodness out of you. Histamine. Just give us a little few minutes on histamine as because we know histamine is to do